Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, October the 20th, 2025. I will start by doing a preview of the main astrological events of the week, and then I will do an I Ching reading for the week. But let's start off with the astrology. Here is the chart for midnight on Monday, October the 20th, 2025, the beginning of the week, set for New York. So as far as this chart is concerned, you can see that the week starts with a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. There it is, Mercury and Mars making a conjunction at 19 degrees Scorpio. So this might mean at the beginning of the week things are a little bit verbal. I mean, Mercury, planet of communication, conjunct Mars. Mars can be quite an aggressive influence. So some of us might have quite a lot to say, though the conjunction is in Scorpio. It's not in Gemini. I mean, Gemini, for example, would be a very verbal sign. Scorpio is perhaps not as verbal as most signs. So this Mercury-Mars conjunction, it does talk about strong words, but those words could be propelled by something going on at an emotional level. So there might be things that we get worked up about emotionally, and we just feel that at some stage we have to express ourselves. And I think that is the right thing to do. What you don't want is to have strong feelings and just feel you can't say anything. They just get worse and worse. They get more intense, and there could be some kind of an explosion. So with that Mercury-Mars conjunction, we have to make sure that we're not repressing anything. Some things really do have to be said, and that Mercury-Mars conjunction is quite close to true Black Moon Lilith, which is at 17 Scorpio. So the content of our words, or perhaps the content of someone else's words, might be quite intense and have a certain darkness to it. So that's how the week starts. Now, as far as how long this Mercury-Mars conjunction is going to last for, well, it probably is going to be sort of quite influential for the first half of a week, and it sort of blends into the new moon, because we have a new moon on Tuesday the 21st, I think, and this new moon is at 28 degrees 22 minutes Libra. So it is the Libra new moon, and so the moon is no longer waning, it's waxing, start of a new lunar cycle, and that's something perhaps to welcome. We can perhaps put away the old, all the dramas of the past, and start to look to the future. And so, what is ending? So, the beginning of a week, maybe something does have to end, and you wrap it all up, and you're getting ready for the new beginning, which coincides with the new moon. And then on Wednesday the 22nd, we have Neptune moving into Pisces. Now, that is a big event. It's not necessarily something we're going to feel on the dot, the moment it happens. But we've had Neptune moving into Aries for some time, through I think since the beginning of the year. I can't remember offhand when Neptune went into Aries. But now Neptune, having gone retrograde, is briefly back into Pisces. Now, I will be talking about that at length in a few days' time. However, a few thoughts about this. Maybe there are things we thought we'd got over. We thought that society had got over. I mean, I'm thinking particularly with Neptune in Pisces is about the whole sort of wokeness aspect of Neptune in Pisces. I think that is a key feature of Neptune in Pisces. This was when everyone's rights should be considered, even if it's at the expense of other people's rights. You just have to always think about the past. You have to always apologize for everything. This is Neptune in Pisces, and of course Neptune in Pisces really coincided with the sort of with the transgender explosion. I mean, okay, the transgender issue has been brewing for a long time. I mean, you can take it back historically, probably since the Second World War or earlier, but it seems to have become sort of particularly intense, right now. Over the last decade or two, with Neptune moving into Pisces, and when Neptune moved into Aries, which roughly coincided with Donald Trump getting elected. People thought, oh, the whole transgender fad ended with Donald Trump getting elected. That's one way of looking at it, but Donald Trump's election was a symptom, and soon after he became inaugurated, Neptune moved into Aries. And so I think that was one aspect of what Neptune in Pisces was about. Now it could be, but when Neptune goes back into Pisces, that there is a sort of a last gasp, sort of rearguard action. Already people are talking about the non-woke left. So the non-woke left are people on the left who used to be fervent supporters of transgender rights, have now sort of backpedaled. They perhaps realise that they're against the spirit of the times. The zeitgeist is just not in accord with them. But maybe with Neptune moving back into Aries, we have a reminder that something is not quite over. And I'll be talking about this in detail in a few days' time. And then just after Neptune goes back into Pisces, and by the way, Neptune is on the Aries point. Neptune is very, very close to 0 degrees Aries, and that in itself is significant, regardless of what sign Neptune is, whether it's in Pisces or in Aries. The Aries point is, the world at large, and the world at large is very Neptunian at the moment. People just don't know. People aren't sure. Although we could also think about Neptune in terms of poisons, pollution, flooding, and so these kind of things might become an issue, while Neptune is very close to the Aries point. And then on Thursday, I think it's on the 23rd, the Sun moves into Scorpio, and straight away it makes a square to Pluto. So you've got Sun in Scorpio moving into Scorpio, trine Pluto. So things do change. The Scorpio season, well, it's kind of already starting because we've got Mercury and Mars in Scorpio, not to mention true black moon Lilith, but the Sun joins Mercury and Mars in Scorpio. So now we have 3 planets in Scorpio. So it is likely that the emotional temperature will start to rise. And in terms of water signs, we'll have 5 planets in water signs. 5 traditional planets in water signs: Jupiter, Saturn, Sun, Mercury, Mars. That's a lot of water. So the emotional side of things, may become quite important over the next week. Again, that's something I will be discussing in detail in my daily horoscopes. And the week ends with Mercury making a trine to Saturn. So Mercury trine Saturn, Mercury in Scorpio trining Saturn in Pisces. Not necessarily a particularly dramatic aspect. Nonetheless, it's something that could be stabilizing. Mercury trine Saturn. Saturn is able to assert its influence, and so that might be one way of looking at things. And of course, when Mercury trines Saturn, it's a reminder that Mercury is quite late in the sign. So Mercury is in Scorpio throughout the week, but it is about to go into Sagittarius. So Mercury goes into Sagittarius. When does Mercury go into Sagittarius? About sort of October the 29th. So the week after Mercury moves into Sagittarius, and that will create another change, but I don't have to talk about it here. So that is the week. I think the week is quite hectic. There are some important events going on. We start with that Mercury-Mars conjunction. Then we've got a new moon. Then we've got Neptune moving into moving back into Pisces, and then Sun in Scorpio square Pluto. So it could be quite an interesting and powerful week. So having looked at the astrology, I want to turn to the I Ching. So I'm going to do an I Ching reading for the week, and my I Ching reading is going to have 4 sections: a general section, then money, then career, and then finally relationships. And yeah, just don't forget that this I Ching reading is absolutely optional. If you've got this far in the video, well, congratulations if you've got this far in the video. But if you have got this far, you don't have to continue watching, and it may be that you don't want your I Ching read, in which case you can just stop watching the video, because this I Ching reading only applies to those who watch it. So I ask the question, what is the week starting on Monday, October the 20th going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 43. So remember, this is a general overview of the I Ching reading before I go into money, career and relationships. So breakthrough. Now that's a hexagram which perhaps has a slightly misleading title. I mean, this is a title that is given by Wilhelm in his translation of I Ching. Breakthrough suggests something quite good, that we are able to make the breakthrough, that perhaps things had been delayed for a certain amount of time, but now we can really move forward. I mean, that's for surface impression. But what this hexagram is really about is an awareness that there is a problem, hence the concept of breakthrough. We have to do something. We have to break out and perhaps escape from danger. And part of the message of this hexagram is that it is possible to escape from danger. We get plenty of warning. So at the beginning of a week, really think about what you are confronting, what you are involved with. Are you in danger? Perhaps you're involved with something you really want to escape from, but you feel you can't. Or you hear the first words of a danger. You're being warned. And there could be a warning here. I think that is a very important message with this hexagram. You are being warned that something bad could happen if you just stay where you are. And you may get warnings from perhaps other people's suffering. One of the sort of imageries of this hexagram is you hear the cries of the prisoners. So you have a sort of the enemy army, they're capturing prisoners, and you can hear the prisoners crying, and so you're not captured yourself. So this is an opportunity to make your escape. But you don't have all the time in the world to make this escape. Now, we do have the second line from the bottom moving, and this gives us some information about the nature of the problem. And the problem here is, well, not necessarily so bad. It suggests that there really is going to be ample warning. Firstly, there is a danger. Then there is a warning. And then there is escape. That is how the sequence works. And at the same time, it is possible that the danger, while it may look really scary on the surface, may not be quite so bad. If we are careful, we tread carefully, then it may be that things are going to be okay. But it's important not to be complacent. Although to an extent we are protected, we are going to be warned in a timely fashion. We shouldn't just think that we can just bide our time. I don't think that is necessarily possible. So because we have a moving line, we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 49, which is revolution. And this indicates that a change is required. Something has to be done. The existing system, is not good enough. And so going back to the previous hexagram, breakthrough, breakthrough was about a warning. We are told that things aren't good enough, things are creaking, the enemy's forces are about to overwhelm us, and something has to change. And that might be where the concept of revolution comes about. In order to avoid some larger problem, maybe even a larger collapse, we have to take matters into our own hands and create change ourselves. And so, yes, escape may be part of it, but what happens once we've made our escape? We perhaps realize that something needs to change. We need to not just adjust our strategy, but to keep going, to perhaps create a revolution. So do think about that in the end, and think about what needs to change. Perhaps the reason for the danger is because you've been complacent, or because you've persisted with a situation which ultimately is unacceptable. So that's a general view of the reading, and now I want to look at things from the perspective of money. So in terms of money, well, we get this hexagram breakthrough, and this could suggest that from a financial perspective there are problems. It could be that there's something you're involved with which is not necessarily going well, or you might be contemplating a financial action or an expenditure which may blow up in your face. And it may be already that you've made commitments. You've provisionally agreed to do something, and you might think that it's too late to change your mind. And the message here is it is absolutely not too late to change your mind. So if you're worried about something of a financial nature, and remember here, I'm not giving financial advice. I have to give the usual warnings. This is just for entertainment purposes only. But nonetheless, you may take the decision to back out of something. You might think you've committed yourself. You might think that all the small print is done and there's no way that you can get out of it. But there is a way to get out of it, I think. And it might also be with breakthrough. Perhaps you bought an expensive item on Amazon. You kind of think you spent too much on it, and you think you really regret the purchase. Might be with breakthrough. You simply have a chance to send it back and get a refund. So that may be another way in which breakthrough is working. But you're starting to see how something can go wrong financially, and you perhaps hear a warning. Someone tells you something, and you know that if you stay with it, there could be a financial loss. But you have a chance. You have a chance to get out, and it might not be quite as bad as you think. And this hexagram, it moves to hexagram number 49. And this hexagram 49 is about revolution. And it may be about how you are viewing your money, and how you're viewing your expenditures and your income. And when you look at it, it's perhaps not so good. I mean, it could be a lot better. And maybe whatever was going on in the previous hexagram, the breakthrough, perhaps you zigzagging along, going from one extreme to another, thinking you've got to do something, you've got to spend something, you've not got to spend something, what do you do? And it perhaps indicates a certain amount of instability here, that you haven't really got your finances under control, and perhaps you're too quick to listen to other people or get yourself involved in things which could turn out to be financially disastrous at an extreme level. But with revolution, it's about change. And so when you look at your finances, just consider the possibility that everything that you believed in the past, or a lot of what you believed in the past, is wrong, and perhaps you've been trusting the wrong people. And so do contemplate a drastic change, though get advice if necessary. And then there is career and business. It depends on your circumstances. Maybe it's not relevant to you, but the first hexagram breakthrough does indicate that there is a problem, or there could be a problem. Regardless of whether you have your own business, or you're going into work, you're an employee. Regardless of the situation, a problem appears to be brewing, and you might get yourself into a situation that could be regrettable. I mean, it could be a job that you're about to get involved in, perhaps, or you might be looking for a job, and maybe you'll think that you have got a breakthrough, that something suddenly works for you, but it may be a dangerous situation. So don't necessarily believe what other people say, and do tread very carefully. There is a possibility of you making a mistake, or perhaps just getting involved in a situation which is not of your making, but it could reflect very badly on you. So if you feel that you're getting involved in something too much, if the water level is coming up to your neck, then don't be afraid to back off. Don't be afraid to say that this is too much, that there is a risk of you messing up. And so if you're in that kind of situation, then it is a good idea to escape, and not to feel that you have absolutely committed to yourself to something. So for example, if you've said you'll do something and it's starting to go wrong, then maybe you just need to admit it. Say, this is not going to work. I don't think you'll be blamed. So there is definitely an escape channel here. And likewise with any commitments you've made to other people, to other organizations, you might think that you've got to honor your promises. But if you can see that things are about to go bad, then the best thing to do is to just make your escape. Now this hexagram does move. It moves to revolution, and it could be this hexagram revolution. It does say perhaps something about your attitude to your work, your job, or perhaps a job you're trying to get, or maybe you're job hunting, whatever it is. But something about your attitude and your approach just isn't good enough. You've been getting things wrong, or you've got your emphasis wrong, and so with revolution, something does need to change. Maybe you will just suddenly get it. You may get a warning. You may give yourself a warning. You may see something about the economy or the prospects of a particular line of business, whatever it is. And because of this, revolution does allow you to really do something dramatic. Now, revolution can be about you taking responsibility, and it may say something about a hierarchy. So, if you're at work, if you're employed, there is often a hierarchy, and one assumes that people at the top of the hierarchy know what they're doing. Even if they don't know what they're doing, you have to do what you're told. But revolution is about a change in the hierarchy. People from lower down in the hierarchy, perhaps overthrowing those at the top, or being able to assert their authority. So revolution can be about a change in the order of things, and it may be a time when people in a sort of a lower position can start to assert themselves in new ways. Because if the situation continues like it is, then there could be problems. So in terms of your own business, or if you have a business, or if you're working for someone else, and you look at the structure of what you're doing, and you look at how it's all coming together, you know that some kind of change is required. That if things just go on as before, things are going to decline. Things are going to ultimately perhaps start to collapse. So it's better to make the change now. And it might be tough, but you've had all the warnings, and the previous hexagram breakthrough was about the warnings. You've got the warnings, and so now it's time to do something about it. And finally, there is relationships, and the whole theme of this I Ching reading is caution, and considering the possibility that something might be wrong. So it kind of depends what relationship you're talking about. If we're talking about a new relationship, someone you've just got involved with, for whatever reason, it needn't be romantic. It could be just for a friendship, or there could be some partnership that's required for some reason or another. Whatever it is, something may not be right, and you get the warning signs. Maybe something someone says, or someone else tells you something, and you kind of get the warning that another person cannot necessarily be trusted. And I must emphasize that I'm not talking about sort of any long-term relationship here. More people that you've known for a fairly brief period of time. You get a warning that something's not right, and maybe you're starting to make commitments to another person. You're perhaps being pressurized to make a commitment, and you have a chance to escape. So don't feel that any relationship is written in stone, and you always have a chance to learn more about another person, and perhaps as you learn more about another person, you realize that this kind of person is not necessarily going to be good for you. Hence the possibility of escape. Now, this can even relate to a longer-term relationship, but you have to remember that this is a hexagram reading. Well, this is an I Ching reading just for 1 week, but there may be some aspect of the relationship that you are warned about. You know that something is not right, and perhaps that something needs to change, and there's still a possibility of overcommitting, and so again, the possibility of escape, is very much there. So if you want to escape from anyone, however long you've known them for, then you certainly can. If the warnings are there, maybe it's a relationship that's been going on for decades and it's breaking down, and you have a chance to escape from it. And so that may be one interpretation of this hexagram. And we do have a moving line, and this moving line really does emphasize that escape is possible. If you're trying to escape from people, if people have just become too much for you, you've seen the warnings and you want to do something about it. The escape definitely can be accomplished. And then this hexagram moves. It moves to hexagram number 49, which is revolution. And this might indicate that certain relationships do have to dramatically change. This might relate to quite long-lasting relationships. Perhaps a relationship has got stagnant. The power dynamic in a relationship has also gone the wrong way, and something needs to be changed. And perhaps it's a time for being, quite strident, and for really expressing your view and not allowing another person to browbeat you. That could be how revolution works. And so a big change is on the cards, and so you should not be satisfied or complacent within existing relationships. And they can be changed. I mean, there is another way of looking at revolution. I mean, revolution could be about a relationship becoming closer, or a relationship appearing out of nowhere, because it's about revolution. It's about complete change. So if you have got yourself in a situation where you're not involved with anyone and you're concerned about relationships, then, well, revolution might be a different approach. A different approach is required, and that would be, for example, the case if you're looking for a relationship. It's indicating that something needs to change, that you need to change, that you perhaps got things wrong in the past, and that a different approach can really make a big difference. But if this area of relationships is important to you, and I understand that it might not be important to you at all, but if it is important to you and you feel that something is wrong or something needs to change, then yeah, this is a week where things can happen. And to begin with, you have to listen to the signs, be aware that there is a warning, and it just could be that there's something that you do need to escape from. So that's my broad view of the week. I know that it's very very general, and of course in my daily horoscopes I'll be looking at things in much greater detail, but I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.